All right. So, as I mentioned, Van went over chapter 30. Hope he doesn't mind. I'm going to go over just a couple of things going through there. And I wanted to start by finishing the names of the patriarchs as well as what their meaning is. You may remember a couple of weeks ago we were discussing how Jacob had married Leah and Rachel, and how they had Leah had been given Zilpah and Rachel Bilhah as midwives, or not midwives, but as maidservants to come along with them. Now, Jacob has worked 14 years for his wives. First 7 for Leah, and then another 7 for Rachel. Now, you also remember that he marries Rachel at the beginning of his 7 years, not at the end like he does with Rachel. So he works 7 years and essentially marries both of them, and then he's going to work another 7 to pay for the bridal price, basically to serve in order to have the privilege to marry Rachel. But he'll end up working even longer than that. We'll see that as we continue on. He'll work a total of 20 years for Laban. And you may remember when he was sent off by his mother, Rebekah expected what? Him to return shortly. You remember in the case of Rebekah, the servant of Abraham simply went and found her, gave the bridal price, and brought her back. That's not the same here. All right, so let's go back into the text. Let's go to chapter 30. And let's, at the end of chapter 29, we see how Leah was given 4 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And the reason, if you go back, I just want to note this. Verse 31 of chapter 29. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, or as we mentioned, the term there is more like unloved, not the term we typically think of as hate, but that she was not loved by her husband, at least to the degree that Rachel was. Right? So again, the name Leah doesn't mean unloved, but she has become synonymous with the concept of a wife who is unloved. Well, the text tells us that because of that, the Lord saw Leah, that she was hated or unloved, and he opened her womb. But Rachel was what? Barren. And so for many years, or several years at least, she doesn't have any children of her own. So you continue reading. We have Reuben, and in the names, it's interesting to note that Reuben means a son, right? And again, the idea there, Leah is naming him with an intent, and she believes, I think, that because now she's born a son, whereas Rachel hasn't, that maybe now Jacob will love her. Well, it doesn't happen, and so then she has Simeon. That name means what? Heard. She thinks now my husband is going to hear me. Maybe he will notice me. Doesn't happen, at least to what her desire is. So then she has Levi. This one's a little more different, but it means attached. And I think the idea there is probably maybe now my husband will become attached to me. Again, that desire to be loved. That he will appreciate her for what she has given to him. And then she has Judah, which literally means praise, right? That maybe now she'll receive praise from her husband. She's now given him 4 sons to continue on his legacy. And you notice with each of those, there's a positive intent on her side. You don't see yet the friction that's going to be created as we continue forward between her and her sister. So those are the first 4, and that's what we were talking about last week. So we get to verse 1. In verse 1, the text says, Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, and what did she do? She envied. Some have labeled envy one of the deadly sins. It's one of the 10 Commandments that Moses will be given later, isn't it? What are we not to do with our neighbor? Covet, right? Covet, jealousy or envy, all closely related ideas. She is coveting what Leah had. Isn't it interesting? Leah covets the praise or the love or the affection that Rachel receives, whereas Rachel envies what? Her ability to bear sons. One other thing that's really interesting as we move forward, who's naming the children? The mother. That will happen until we get to Benjamin. It's a little bit of a change on Benjamin. But with all of these, the mother is naming the children. All right, so Rachel notices it creates envy in her heart. And again, that's probably not something that just happened one day. This has been an ongoing, disintegrating relationship between her and Leah, and this envy has grown. And so then she goes to Jacob. We kind of mentioned this last week. I won't read all these. But she goes to Jacob and she's like, give me children. Now, does Jacob have any ability to just do that? No, where do children come from? They come from God. And the text has already told us that it was God that made her barren. It wasn't Jacob. And so Jacob actually gets angry with her. And so she devises a plan. What's her plan? Well, she says, I've got this servant Bilhah, and I'm going to let Jacob go into her. Now, we heard this before. Yeah, Sarah laid out this plan in her life. Was that good? No. But again, the cycle of sin, it grows as we allow it to just fester. And now you have Rachel offering Bilhah. So he's had 4 boys. Now he's going to get number 5. Bilhah provides him a son. His name is Dan. If you go down to verse 6, then Rachel said, God has judged me and has also heard my voice and given me a son. Isn't that interesting? Therefore, she called his name Dan. Dan means judged, quite literally. So you start to see the tone change, don't you? Now, when you have children, when you have grandchildren, do you spend some time on the name? I know we did. Why do we spend so much effort in the name?
Because it's what they're going to be called the rest of
It's going to be called, right? It has a huge impact on their life, and hopefully on their future. And that's very true. In the Bible, names are really huge. But what begins with Dan is almost a battle with names between these 2 women. They're not going to go out and fight out in the street and just box it out, right? They're fighting through the use of their children. Now, why can Rachel call Bilhah's son her son? That was very much the custom. Bilhah has now went from being a maidservant to a concubine. She is now a concubine. Again, what's a concubine? You maybe hear that term. You've probably read it in the Old Testament. What is a concubine?
Second-class wife.
Second-class wife. That's a great way to phrase it. She is a wife now to Jacob. Now he has 3 wives. But she is considered lower class than Rachel. We all may have an initial kind of reaction to that. We're not trying to justify the situation. That's just what it is. And so because she's a concubine, Rachel can now claim her child as her son Dan as her own. And so she does. So now she has her first son. She names him Judged. What do you think she means by judged? Well, she's made a case before God, or at least before her husband, and she feels what? Justified in that Bilhah has borne a son. That maybe she's won around here with her sister. Well, as it continues, Bilhah has a second son. His name is, if you go down to verse number 8, this son is called Naphtali. Naphtali literally means wrestling. What might be the implication of that? Well, she's wrestling with her sister, isn't she? Wrestling for the affections of Jacob, wrestling for standing in the family.
The whole situation.
Yes, exactly. Isn't it interesting? Fascinating. Naphtali, just a little side note. Later on, I can't remember the chapter off the top of my head, but Jacob is going to wrestle with an angel, isn't he? And God changes his name to what? Israel. What does Israel literally mean? Wrestled with God. So he has a son named Naphtali who has a similar kind of meaning to his name, which means wrestling. All right, so that happens. Well, you're going to have a reaction, aren't you? So now Leah sees what's going on. She's had 4 sons, and she kind of, she was the one having the children. Well, now she's not happy that Rachel has now had 2 sons. And so then she goes, if you go to verse 9, so Leah had 4 sons, verse 9. When Leah saw that she had ceased bearing children. So what's happened to her what happened to Rachel has now happened to her. She's gone barren. She's not having children. And so she wants to win this war. So she goes and she takes Zilpah, her maidservant, and gives her to Jacob. Now Jacob has 4 wives, 2 wives, first-class wives, if you will, and then 2 concubines. Zilpah, verse 10, bears Jacob a son. And what's his name? Gad. Well, what do you think Gad means? Well, the text actually tells us this one, doesn't it? Leah said, verse 11, good fortune has come. Gad means good fortune. Now, there's a little variant meaning here to this one, and it may also mean the troops have arrived. Kind of an odd variation. But even in that sense of battle, when the troops have arrived, when your own troops have arrived, that's a good thing, right? And so the meaning is kind of still the same. Good fortune. So now she's went back in her battle with Rachel, and now she's got her again. Now she's up to 5. Well, Zilpah is not done. Zilpah bears a second son, verse 12. And what's his name? Asher. Asher means happy. Happy. Now that on the face of it may seem, wow, that's not bad, right? Happy, that's a good emotion. How do you think where's that happiness coming from?
She's got 6 sons in there.
I've just upped her again. I'm happy, right? She has a full household here. She's like, look at me, I'm happy. Well, so now at this point, Jacob has 8 sons. And then you have something I think you all had brought up last week. Verse 14. In the days of the wheat harvest, this will be about the May time of year, our time of year, May. Reuben, the oldest son, went out and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, noting that he had found these mandrakes, Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." Verse 15. But she said to her, "Is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you take away my son's mandrakes also?" Rachel said, "Then he may lie with you tonight in exchange for your son's mandrakes." So I got a few things to say here. But let's talk about mandrakes first. All right, mandrakes, I don't know if you know this. That's a mandrake plant right there. That's kind of what it looks like. I've been in some cow pastures, and probably not the same plant, but I've seen some that look very similar to that. This is the mandrake, the entire plant with a root there. The root is what you're trying to get at most of the time. Mandrakes are also known as the love apple or love apples. You maybe think, why? Well, at the time, this is not scientifically true, but at the time, there was a myth that mandrakes had an aphrodisiac element to them, that their fragrance, to smell them, would make you more fertile. You ever heard of the, I don't know if it's Greek, I think it's a Greek goddess Aphrodite. You've heard of Aphrodite? Well, she's known as the mandrake goddess. You also will note in Song of Solomon, chapter 7 and verse 13, Song of Solomon. Did I say Samuel? I got Samuel in the brain. Song of Solomon, 7:13. Solomon actually writes about mandrakes there. And you remember the Song of Solomon is all about love, right? And affection of a husband and wife. Well, the mandrake is in the potato family. Kind of interesting. I didn't know that. And they're actually poisonous. You have to be very careful with them. But in their culture of the day, they were seen as good for fertility. And so that would explain Rachel's interest in them. They also were highly prized. Again, because of the nature of what was believed about them, they were in high demand. And so it's no wonder that when Rachel comes in asking for these, I mean, if you're Leah, then you are going to be a little bit upset, like you trying to come and pilfer my family's wealth. Well, then Rachel makes a deal, doesn't she? She makes a deal with Leah. And at this point, it almost appears that Jacob has really become a pawn in the war of these two ladies. And so Rachel decides to trade a night with her sister Leah for these mandrake roots. Now, I wonder if later on she had great regret about it. I don't know, because she does eventually give birth to Joseph. But in the meantime, Leah then goes and has two more sons. Through her night with Jacob, she has a son. Notice verse 16. Jacob came from the field in the evening. Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me." For what? "For I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." In other words, he's become a prostitute. He's been hired out for the night. And so, verse 17, God listened to Leah, and then she conceived and bore a fifth son. This would be Issachar. What do you think Issachar means? Wages or hire. Now, you take some time with your children because you want them to have a strong name that's going to give them confidence and pride, right? How would you like to find out? My name was given to me because my mother hired out my father in order to have me. So it's just interesting. Yes, sir.
I was just curious why he would have to be
Yeah. So I don't know their routine. I'm assuming they had a schedule, and Rachel got these many days, Leah got these many days, and there's some kind of rotation. The Bible does not describe what that was. But basically, the implication seems to be that Rachel sold to Leah for a mandrake one of her nights. That she was supposed to be with Jacob.
I think Solomon needed Outlook.
Huh?
I think Solomon needed that Microsoft Outlook.
Oh, yeah. Well, with his, I don't know how you do with the vast numbers of, yeah, Solomon's a whole different, yeah. This is just 4. But again, it shows you kind of what's going on here. Huh?
Were you talking about the 4 ladies?
Yeah, and then you got Zilpah and Bilhah. I don't know how they fit into that rotation either, right? You think a basketball coach has got a difficult job figuring out his rotation. This has much greater implications, doesn't it? And so, but that's what happens. Issachar's born. His name means wages or hire. So basically, she hired out that night to be with, or she paid for that night to be with Jacob. But she does get a 5th son. Well, she's not done yet. She'll have one more son. His name is Zebulun. If you go down to verse 20, it says, I born him 6 sons. So she called his name Zebulun. Zebulun means honor. The idea there may be that she was like, finally, I'll be honored. That he'll show me honor, proper due for what I've done for him. At this point, all of them are done except for Rachel. Poor Rachel, in some ways, I'm really conflicted about it because they all have their qualities where I'm like, man, not good behavior. But for all this time, she herself has been barren. No children. And I don't think we can underestimate the mindset that she lived in that day. As a woman, to be barren was a very negative thing for them. They were looked down not just on themselves, but society at large looked down on them and judged them.
Even though she was considered very beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And very loved by Jacob. But she wanted to have a child. Well, finally, verse 22, I don't know how long it's been, but the text says God remembered Rachel. Now again, the term they remembered doesn't mean that God forgot about Rachel. But the idea is there he now took note of her. And God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son and said to him, God has taken away my reproach. She called his name Joseph, saying, may the Lord add to me another son. So she has Joseph, and we have so much to say about Joseph later. I mean, of all of the sons, in essence, she, in my opinion, received the cream of the crop. But unfortunately, she doesn't seem to have viewed it that way. They were looking at numbers, at fertility. What God blessed her with in Joseph was a son of real honor and holy or righteousness, a man who truly tried to be righteous. His name, interestingly enough, isn't some kind of like name that really emphasizes his character, but it's simply he adds. And what's really intended there is, when she gives him that name, is that he is going to add more sons. It seems to be her belief that she's now going to become very fertile and have more sons to come along the way. Now she will eventually have a second son. His name's Benjamin. But it's not going to be right away. Benjamin is not going to come along for a while, for several years. He's not born until when? Till after Joseph has been sent away. And that gets us into the meaning of Benjamin. I just want to step out of our normal flow here just for a second. If you go to Genesis chapter 35, we read about the birth of Benjamin. Genesis 35 and verse 18. Notice what all Rachel has been through at this point. She has a son, finally, after her sister and the other two women have had all of these children. She finally has a son, Joseph. And Jacob loved Joseph. You remember how the text goes and how he really treasured Joseph, even maybe to a fault in the way he uplifted him even above his brothers. But then what happens? Well, she thinks he's been murdered, or not murdered, but killed by wild animals, right? He's gone. And then finally she has a second son. Verse 18, it says, and as her soul was departing, let's see. So, verse 16, then they journeyed from Bethel. They went, when they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel went into labor, and she had hard labor. And when her labor was at its hardest, the midwife said to her, do not fear, for you have another son. Notice this. This is sad text. And as her soul was departing, for she was dying, she called his name Ben-Oni. But his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, interestingly enough, Bethlehem. So, she doesn't have another son until right before her death. She never finds out that Joseph is okay. She's never reunited with Joseph. She never finds out any of that information. So she has a son. His name is Ben-Oni. I think, don't quote me on the pronunciation. I might be a little bit off. But this is one of those where, depending on what it actually means, and it's kind of a difficult one to interpret, it either means son of my sorrow or son of my strength. Now, those are seemingly very different, contrasting ideas there. I don't know which one's the proper one of those two, but it could be either one of those. And I think this is kind of sad too, and maybe it's just because Jacob doesn't want to remember the loss of his wife. He ends up changing his name to Benjamin. And it's interesting, and there may be even kind of a nice quality to this, because he says, son of my right hand. What's implied in that?
Very close, very close.
Yeah, he lost Joseph, and now finally he's had a son restored that he can hold close tight, because why? They're the son of his beloved Rachel. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking, we were talking a while ago, his involvement with the other ladies. In my mind, I think he primarily, Rachel was his wife, and that's who he wanted to be with, and from the beginning, and Joseph and Benjamin. You see that when they're in captivity, and then they put Benjamin. They know he's a favorite, and and they know it'll break his heart if Benjamin doesn't return and all this stuff when they go over to Egypt to get food in that scenario. And you see that, and you say, well, Rachel's his special one. These other ladies, I think it's just an occasional, you did it. And I kind of want to believe that it was one lady, that he loved.
Well, I think that's definitely true. And as we go through, and I was thinking about this, it's so many places to throw fault, right? I think Leah is the one I don't throw fault on, but with Laban and with Jacob, and at times even with Rachel, I think there's times when all of them had faults. But if everyone had acted honorably if Laban had acted honorably from the very beginning, all of this would have been avoided, most likely. And go ahead.
To me, Leah, that first night, she didn't come straight and say, hey.
Well, and she does go along with it. So, maybe there's even some there. So I don't really have a great finish kind of idea there for you. But I know he did have deep affection for Rachel. He did indeed love her, I think, very intently. While at the same time, we can honor that, while at the same time condemning some of the other things that occurred.
Plus, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Roger. Yeah. Well, and I want to come back to that for just a second. Yeah, we're talking about Leah with.
Yeah, if she was getting, 25%, okay, she probably would have.
Mm-hmm. So, Lisa, and then I want to say a couple other things.
All those sons, they only have one daughter, or do you think it doesn't mention any other daughters?
Well, good question. I don't know of another daughter. I do want to come back. I hadn't forgot her. Dina, or Dinah, however you want to pronounce it. I will say the Hebrew, we don't know how to pronounce all the Hebrew words, so we get as close as we can. But she's the one mentioned. Does anybody know of another note of any other daughters? I don't know of any others. Which, if she is the only one, you can imagine with having all these brothers, how protected she was. But also explains why the brothers reacted so strongly when what happens to her later on is why they basically kill a town in order to seek revenge. We'll get to that. Hold on to that one. So we have all this going on. I don't want to miss Dina. The last child that Leah has, right after Zebulun, we'll note that Dina was born. Her name is a little bit obscured, but it seems to be, and you again study this, but it seems to be Judgment. And this is Leah's final child. And so I don't know if she's maybe saying God has finally passed final judgment. Because remember, at this point, Rachel has no sons of her own. Well, whatever the meaning, I don't know, but maybe that she feels like God has judged between her and Rachel. Now, there's some things here, some macro view ideas. I know I'm going a little bit over time. I'm going to go a little bit over time. That are going on that I think are kind of significant. So, number one, the conflict between Rachel and Leah, the envy that's there, it almost mirrors the envy between who? Jacob and Esau. That has been a problem. I think about David. When he sins with Bathsheba, what does the prophet David tell him is going to be a consequence of his sin? Well, of course, the young child dies. But what was the bigger historical overarching consequence? Do you remember? Yes, ma'am.
The conflict between his children.
Yes. Do you remember how it's phrased, anybody? The sword will never depart from your family. That there was going to be this ongoing conflict. Well, that seems to be going on here in Jacob's family. And one of the things I've often wondered, and we can't say this definitively, but what would lead the other sons to do what they did to Joseph? And it may have its roots back here. Think about how, just give me 1 second, I'll come back to you. If I don't say it, I'll forget it. But our children listen to us. They hear what we have to say. And the conversations that are going on, they're listening. I find it hard to believe that tension was not created amongst the brothers because of the tension between Leah and Rachel. And it may have, well, we know at one point at least it leads to hatred with Joseph. Now, they don't have the same effect with Benjamin, and maybe that has a lot to do with the guilt they feel over Joseph. But this is something that again, is as you go forward, it rolls and cycles as we move forward. Were you going to say something, Turner?
Well, any kind of favoritism, I mean, I can see, Joseph, had a coat and so forth like that. You don't hear about that in any others, and it don't take much before the rest of them, there's some envious eye that turns that way, and their actions will, betray them in that.
And envy can be inherited.
Right.
Hatred can be inherited.
Go back to Jacob and Esau. He tricked his own blind father.
And then also tricked his brother, right?
Yeah, for his brother's birthright.
All with his mother's support, right? And all of that, it has to intermingle in these things. Yes, ma'am.
So would you call Jacob righteous?
Ooh,
I don't know how you can reconcile.
there's some hard things to reconcile.
He was a polygamist too. It's just hard for me to.
Well, and he's going to do some other things along the way.
Right, but he was chosen, obviously. But
The Bible never calls him righteous.
We had this conversation too.
Yeah. Go ahead.
46 says sons and daughters, so maybe daughters is daughters in law, but that could indicate more than just Dinah.
Yeah, and it could very well be likely, because we're not given any more children from Zilpah or Bilhah. I feel pretty confident this is Rachel's only two from the text. But again, did they just go completely barren from that point forward? But again, we're guessing, because the Bible, as far as I know, does not uncover any more siblings.
Maybe the only reason why we're given this is because those are the 12 tribes, and then we have to know about Dinah because of what happened with the sons.
Good point. And yeah, because they're going to become major. I mean, the rest of the text, these 12 are so vitally important to them, to the rest of the text of the Old Testament and into the New.
You see any signs that Jacob might have been a wimp?
He wrestled an angel to the point the angel submitted, so I don't know. I think he's a man who got caught between four women.
he made his decisions too.
No, I'm not justifying him. No, I'm just saying about how he didn't. And also when we get into the rest of Laban, remember Laban is going to practice deceit, but Jacob, the deceiver, becomes deceived and has already.
Yeah, this is a weird story, but we had I guess a dinner. We're actually on a campaign, but there was one more woman than men. And you ate lunch, they drew names to have lunch, but I ended up with two, and I ended up with, and you matched up with, you drew a name, and you were that person, and you ate with your spouse, right? And I ended up with Leah and Rachel. And let me tell you, it was just like that too. One was beautiful and one was not. And it did not work out.
I want that to be noted online. I did not say that. Yes, ma'am. And then I'll. Oh, were you going to say something? I'm sorry. Gotcha. So anyway, very fascinating. Next week we'll get into Jacob's leaving, and one other thing, just to keep a note, I'm going to refer back to this. But with the mandrake root, you see what influences of mythological culture on these people. That's going to be significant going forward, because those kind of influences don't just go away. But we see it here. We'll also see it in the lambs and the sheep and the goats with Jacob. We see a little bit of the the culture surrounding them influencing his decisions on some of that. That's going to be, I think, a little bit interesting. But anyway, we'll look at that next week. Any other comments or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Wait, why did he have to, did Leah encourage him to sleep with her?
Yes, so she gave him Zilpah, and Rachel gave him her maidservant Bilhah, just like Sarah gave her maidservant.
That's really confusing. I see that throughout the Old Testament, they adding more and more women.
Yeah, and just one other thing, again, not a justifier, but it's hard for us in our culture to almost relate to this. But of the culture of the day, this was not uncommon by any means. Again, not a justification for it, but that was the culture of their day. It was common practice to have more than one wife. It was common practice for concubines. Yes, ma'am.
Wait, so, which are the brothers that sold Joseph into slavery? Which one are those?
That's all of them, except Benjamin. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought he would have like Dan and Natalie, back him up.
No, they're over here with the other ones.
Okay, just one.
Yeah, good question. We'll get to that eventually. Any other comments, questions? Thank y'all for your participation and discussion. I enjoy talking about this. Hopefully I didn't just regurgitate all your lesson, Van, but I think this is significant. That noting the conflict that's here from the very beginning, I think is significant pushing forward into Genesis, especially when we get into the life of Joseph. All right, we'll go ahead and dismiss from this time. I do